Good afternoon, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you are well. In the next few days, I'm going to travel to Johannesburg. And as you know, I have a puppy. She's 16 weeks, 16 and a half weeks, a Malinois puppy. And they can be a handful. If you do research on Malinois on the internet, on YouTube, you'll see that there's a lot of talk about Malinois not being for everybody. They're a handful. Last night she stole 3 pieces of chicken and 2 Karoo oesters. What is the other word for Karoo oester? Liver in net fat. Those little cakes. Chopped liver in net fat on the braai. Off the braai. And that's not a common thing for a dog to be brave enough to, go near to fire. I turned my back for 2 minutes and it was all gone. Another feature of these dogs is that they're difficult to house train. Apparently, notoriously so. I thought it was just me until I watched a video on the web where they mentioned it. Professional trainer. One of the 2 biggest in the USA. The second biggest in the USA, I believe. Another characteristic of them is that they suffer separation anxiety. Louis Hutton, who many of you know, Louis and Marguerite, told me about a similar dog that he had. I don't know if it was a Malinois, but I believe it was a German Shepherd, and as you may or may not know, there is some similarity between them. Nowadays, all of the SWAT and the army and the police dogs that look like German Shepherds are in fact Malinois. End of story. The vast majority. But they can be confused, and there's a reason for that. And that is their common ancestry. So they share some traits. One of them being this sort of hyper anxiety and attachment. And Louis told me that he was seeing a girl when he was young, and he got that dog. And so this girl was in a remote town, and so in order to see her, he had to spend time. He would go stay with his chommy, and then he would see the girl over 3 or 4 days, and then not see her for 2 or 3 weeks. On the first occasion, after he got that dog, that he did that he went to see this woman, the dog, what is the right word? Het haar dood getreur. She grieved herself by his absence to death in 4 days. And I'm afraid that, not that she's going to grieve herself to death, this Judith of mine, but that it's not going to be helpful to her psychologically for me to be away for 4 or 5 or 6 days. Sadly, she's just too young to take with me. And where I'll be staying in Johannesburg on the East Rand with the Huberts, who many of you know well, the dog situation there is a bit dicey. They've got a big, aggressive boerboel, and they've got a mental Deutsche Jagd Terrier. What a dog. Anyway, my fear is that Judith is going to suffer separation anxiety, and it will be unhealthy for her, but I'm left with no choice because I have to go and see my sons, and I have 4 very important pieces of work to do for Suidlanders. Now, in the same way, or similarly, some people have contacted me over the past few days to talk about their concerns regarding Suidlanders' separation from the verdedigingsbeen of Suidlanders, which shall now be known as Suidland Burgerlike Beskerming, but it will be a separate entity. I haven't discussed it with Mr. Miller. He didn't discuss it with me prior to the events that transpired. We held a brief conversation yesterday, actually on another subject, so it came up in passing. I'm not really any the wiser. I don't have a special insight, but presumably they will form their own non-profit company or whatever entity. They'll have their own tax number, their own VAT number, their own skills development levy deal number, obligation, workman's compensation fund, and so on and so forth. They own a bank account, they own everything. My point is quite simply that it is a proper separation. It's not a sham of any sort. And some people are perturbed by that. Others are not. Others are a bit like a teenager who hears that his parents are going away for the weekend and they're going to be left at home. That never ever happened. I'm laughing because that never ever happened to us. Not over my mother's dead body. But it would have been nice if it had. But for some people it's lacquer. One lady has mentioned to me on a number of occasions that she has her own opinion about the verdedigingsbeen, and yesterday I chatted to her husband and he said to me, oh, she's going to be so happy about all of this. That's one opinion. It's an opinion. It's just an opinion. And then there are those people who say, oh, we're going to lose our capacity, and some members may go over there, and as I say, I don't have anything especially insightful or intelligent to say on the subject, except for this, and I hope that it's not too wishy-washy for you. I hope that I don't leave you thinking that I've tried too hard. But genuinely and sincere, this is absolutely sincere. I think that we are in a time of such dramatic, great events occurring in the world. Sorry, dude. I've got WhatsApp notifications on, and I certainly didn't add that setting, but I've just updated WhatsApp, and they've obviously decided for themselves that my previous settings were not their preference. So now I must get notifications. A time of such huge drama in the world and in South Africa that it doesn't really matter. You don't have to grieve over it. You don't have to be happy about it. That happy thing, I hope, doesn't give the wrong impression. It's just that some people feel, especially members who've been around for 19 or 20 years. That particular family signed up at Mr. Miller's second ever presentation. Second ever. And over their 19 years of official membership, paying fees every month, they've developed their proclivity, their preference about burgerlijk and civil and, building the non militaristic departments and so on. That's their thing. You don't have to be happy or grieve. I think there's a middle ground. For me, there is. With what is happening in the world today, given that we still maintain a relationship. Let's face it, the entire Verdedigingsbeen, or SBB, was born out of Suidlanders. The entirety. Born out of. So there must always be some fraternity. There must be. There has to be, surely. Surely. We can never forget who's our father, who's our mother, who's our brother. In the times that lie ahead of us, given ESCOM, given the war in Ukraine, given the food shortages, the CBDCs, the emerging CBDCs. We're going to make some more videos on CBDCs very soon. I'm just going to have my hands really full for the next week or so and be able to do very little other work but that work. The global financial crisis, these hundreds of trillions of rand, or of dollars I should say, that are dragging down the financial system, and the global economic crisis, not to mention the possible war in Taiwan, or over Taiwan, not to mention the chaos in Europe, not to mention the anarchy, I don't think is a bad word, in American politics at present, not to mention the kind of feverish uncertainty that many African and South American and Asian nations seem to be expressing quietly. Really? Let mom and dad go away. We won't burn the house down. We won't drink all of the liquor. But neither are we going to trear ourselves to death. Judith must calm down. She's going to John for a few days with Macy and Pebbles. Pebbles is dying, but she still has a voracious appetite, and I've been told by an expert, a dog trainer for the police, or a former dog trainer for the police and the army actually, that as long as she has a good appetite, I should leave her. She's well enough. That's the norm. That's the standard. So she's going to have her friends. John has a couple of doggies that she can play with. And John used to breed, I think it was Shar-Peis. And he's the kindest of all men. And as he said to me by way of warning, these were not his exact words, but I think this was the point he was making. Simon, you do know that she's going to have to get a taste of my shambok, don't you? I said, yeah. Because she's absolutely uncontrollable and incorrigible. She's completely incorrigible. You have to give her an instruction 7 times before she listens, if it's one of those that she doesn't like. But it'll be okay. It'll be okay for her, and it'll be okay for me. I'll come back to my dog. She won't have wandered. She won't have become the whole dorp's dog, as Macy has become, very sadly. She'll be all right. I'll be all right. Suidlanders, of Suidland burgerlike beskerming. And Suidlanders will each do their own thing. We will continue to grow and progress at a time when the world is in a state of fear and fright. We are preparing. You know how I like to talk about prepping for poor people? I'm going to do a video about that, maybe shortly after this. Because when Andre Coetzee and Humbertus Schwan met me, I was living poor, really poor. Through a series of events, I'd landed up in the worst of circumstances. Lost everything, everything, everything. And I was a high flyer. No, I don't mean like a millionaire, but in my profession, I was world recognized. And this morning, I was thinking about that thing of, is there something else that I could buy with minimal bucks? Now, my list is so long. This is just fantasy. Fantasy, pure and simple. If you gave me 5 million rand, for the sake of a number, I would not buy this thing, because that 5 million would get chowed up long before I got to it. But I thought to myself that the person who over time buys 1,000 tubes of toothpaste, cheap toothpaste, the medium-sized tubes or the medium-small, I think you get 4 sizes, the big ones, then there's like a size down, and then there's the dinky ones, but there's one in the middle that some brands produce, isn't there? For whatever they are, 7 rand each, 5. If you bought 1,000 of those and you went into a crisis, you could live well for a long time. If you know how to barter and trade. If that's not your gift, then it's a waste of your money. And I've kind of digressed from the theme of this thing, but what I'm saying is there's so much that's going on. There's so much with which we can occupy our minds. There's so much that we can get on with. There's so much that we can prepare. We should worry. We should worry about separation. No. Let them do their thing, what they do best. Let us do what we do best. And everything will work out for the best. Thank you for listening to this video. Goodbye. God bless you and yours for the time that lies ahead of us. Cheerio.